I'm Slaya, and this is Introduction to Tabletops, the GM. So I've been trying to figure out how to do this video for a while. At first I was going to do players and GMs, and then I thought maybe I could separate them, and then I didn't know how to do that exactly. But lately there's a couple things that have come up that have actually made me realize that a separate video on GM and players is probably a good idea and hopefully very helpful to our audience. So I'm going to start off with my own first experience GMing. So the first real game I GM'd, it was a one-shot, which means it was just one session, one night, and I decided to do New World of Darkness. Why New World of Darkness? Because it was the only game I was familiar with. I think I said that in a different video. And I knew inside and out, so I decided to do a vampire game. So my husband, or future husband at the time, got me a couple players and we sat down and it was the worst thing ever. It was embarrassingly bad. I think the only good thing about it was I pulled off a pretty good Yiddish accent. And the end of the game devolved into jokes about hipsters. It was just me, the GM, sitting in the corner, red-faced, so embarrassed, and everyone's laughing at my campaign. And yeah, they was like, no, it was okay, it was whatever. But truth is, you could tell they were laughing at the campaign. And I really lost a lot of confidence because of that. I'd really wanted to GM for a long time, and I couldn't do it, especially with a game I knew so well. How could this be? Well, I've actually started to think about that, and I've thought about it in terms of people have been cropping up. Every now and again, my husband will see something of a new person trying to GM their first game. And the thing we've noticed about it is that a lot of times when they're new like that, they're not familiar enough with tabletops themselves to really know how to GM a game, but then realize they're also not familiar enough with the material at hand. What does that mean? So there's something my husband does a lot where he'll have a theme that he wants to play. Like, let's say he wants to play a Western game, and he really wants to run a Western game. He just watched a Western movie. He loved it. He wants to run it. It'd be the best, but he can't. He's tried so many times to run a Western game, and he can't do it. And here I am. I like Westerns, but Western games somehow just speak to me. Something about the Odyssey of the West. I love running Deadlands, which is a huge Western setting, and it just, I don't know, something about it is really, it's really fun for me to run, and I really get into it. But, you know, he loves this too, but he cannot do it, and he knows the tabletop system inside and out. He knows the subject passably well, but that's the problem, is there is a certain disconnect from it, where he'll have an idea, but he doesn't have a real sense of the world. And that's what happened with me with New World of Darkness, was I knew the system, but I had no sense of what to do. And this is GMing 101. This is the finding a plot, finding a story. So you know a world, you know it passably well, but to run a game, there are so many factors that go into it that make it so much harder than just knowing your subject material. And this is what I mean by have a sense of it. So you, the GM, are the storyteller. You're telling a story, but instead of your characters, it's everyone else's characters interacting with the story. So a lot of GMing is actually thinking on your feet. What I like to say is, like, I'm a writer, and my favorite part of writing is when my own characters run away and do their own thing, and that's really exciting for me, but truthfully, it's still in my head. I still made that up. But when you're GMing, those characters around you, they're running away from you, and they're not yours. They're not in your head. You have to think on the spot of what happens next. And to do that, you really need a sense of the world and your story. And a lot of times, people just don't have that when they GM. And not because they won't ever have it, but because a particular system doesn't speak to them that way, or a particular setting or something. But that's what GMing is essentially, is just knowing what to do next, especially when your players throw a wrench at you, because they will. Like, you will tell them, hey, look, door number 1 has a treasure chest and door number 2 has a giant monster. They will go through door number 2. The worst part is, door number 1, I'd planned the giant monster. Door number 2, I had nothing planned. And suddenly I have to rearrange everything to figure out what's going to happen in door number 2, because door number 1, I'd planned a 2-hour session, and door number 2 was a red herring. But players will do that to you. It's like, treasure, guys, treasure. Yeah. So that's the thinking on your thinking. Knowing what's going to happen in your world in general really helps you in those moments where your players go nuts. And so for new GMs, they just don't have that because they don't know that they need to have that. So that's what happened to me my second time running. Was I played on Hell Metropolis, which is a steampunk setting, and I was running a module, which is basically the writers, or maybe a third party, will write a session out that people can play, and they give you room to improvise and create characters usually, or sometimes they'll provide characters. And you run this, your GM can run this if they want to, get a sense of how the world works or the system works, or, new players, etc. There's many reasons to run modules. They're really good oftentimes, especially the ones written by the writers themselves. So I was running a module, and it did get to a point where my players, they killed the main boss halfway through the session. And I just went, oh shit. And that was my first moment of going, okay, think on your feet. It's not in the book here. There's nothing written here about what happens if they kill the boss in the first half of the game. Well, make something up. So I just made up that they went into the basement and they had to go fight a bunch of ghouls. And it worked. And I came out of it going, hey, that worked. Like, oh my god, that worked. Like, that quick reaction, figuring out what to do, and feeling comfortable in this world to be able to do that. And that's when it hit me that even though I knew NWOD, New World of Darkness, so well, I was just never comfortable in that world. I liked when someone else ran the game and I could play in that, but it just never struck a chord with me. I never really had a sense of what I wanted to run or what plot I wanted to do. But with Unhallowed and the steampunk gothic setting, it just all worked for me. And so that's the essence of GMing, is like, things can go wrong, they will go wrong. You can make mistakes. Sometimes you'll have to force players into situations you don't like. But more often than not, if you can, think on your feet, let the story progress as the story will progress, and let your players and their characters do what they will, but also keep track to what you have in front of you. That's what makes a good GM. And what makes a better GM is a GM that knows their limits and knows if this is not working for them, they need to set it aside. And believe you me, everyone can be a GM. There are systems out there that will instantly inspire you, and you'll know exactly what you want to do and how to play and how to run the world. And then there are systems you may know so freaking well that you just have no idea what to do. But just know that you can GM. Everyone can GM. Everyone can play. Okay, maybe not everyone can GM. I'm sorry. There are stories I've heard. Not everyone. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to be inspiring and stuff, but for the most part, if you find what you're looking for, you can and will be able to GM. I hope that helps. I'll probably maybe do a second video about this, more about players and GMs. Especially want to address an article that I saw recently that tried to talk about this and I thought didn't really do a good job, so I did want to discuss what the GM and player relationship is, and I'll do that in another video. And then I'll also do a player video, especially for all you newbies who've never really played a game and don't know that when you're in a situation you can actually scream.